Welcome in, everyone. We are so glad to have you with us today because, if you're the kind of person who loves connecting the dots, really getting into the weeds without all the typical info overload, you are in exactly the right place.
Absolutely. And we have some really fascinating source material to get through today.
We really do. So the mission for today's deep dive is to unpack the source material covering the year 2000, which, it's a year etched in our collective memory.
Oh,
Right?
for sure. The glasses with the zeros, the fireworks.
Exactly. But the goal today is to go way beyond those obvious pop culture memories. We want to explore the factual milestones from the sources that really laid the foundation for the world you live in right now. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Right out of the gate, looking at the historical data, there is a massive, and I mean massive global misconception about what this year actually represented.
Yeah, the Millennium Bug, but also the actual millennium itself.
Right, because the whole planet threw the biggest party in history on January 1st to welcome the 21st century. But mathematically, historically, the year 2000 was actually the last year of the 20th century and the second millennium.
It's a brilliant little quirk of our calendar system. The Gregorian calendar doesn't actually have a year zero.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. It started at year one. So the first millennium was years 1 through 1000. And the second was 1001 through 2000. So technically, yeah, 2000 was the finale, not the premiere.
But human psychology just loves those round numbers, right?
Oh, completely. We see those 3 zeros roll over and we just instinctively think, well, new era. And that tension between what we felt was happening and what was actually happening really defines the historical records for this entire year.
It sets the stage for everything.
It really does. The overarching theme from the sources is that 2000 was a transitional bridge. It was characterized by this immense technological optimism, profound geopolitical shifts, and honestly a stark reminder of the unpredictability of the natural world.
So let's step onto that bridge, starting with the psychological state of the world as the calendar flipped. We have to talk about Y2K.
The year 2000 problem.
Right. For anyone who wasn't there or, doesn't really know the mechanics, why exactly were we so terrified of a calendar change?
Well, it all came down to the cost of computer memory back in the 1960s and 70s. Storage was just incredibly expensive.
Right.
So programmers saved space by storing dates using only 2 digits. So, they'd use a 98 for 1998.
Which seems fine until you run out of numbers.
Exactly. The fear was that when the clock struck midnight and the year shifted to 00, the computer systems wouldn't know if it was the year 2000 or the year 1900.
Which means, automated interest rates calculate incorrectly,
Right.
power grid maintenance schedules just fail, flight logistics completely scramble.
Precisely. It was a genuine systemic threat. But the reality is that relatively few problems actually occurred.
Because it wasn't a hoax.
No, not at all. The disaster was mitigated because companies and governments actually did the work. They spent billions in the late 90s digging into legacy code.
Digging through all that old clunky programming.
Upgrading software, testing systems over and over. It was a massive, highly successful global engineering effort.
It's like preparing for Y2K was exactly like boarding up your house for a Category 5 hurricane.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. And when the storm hits and it just drizzles, everyone thinks the meteorologist lied or it was a big scam,
Yeah.
completely forgetting that the only reason the house survived the wind is because we boarded the windows.
Yeah, we solved the problem so well that people just assumed there was never a problem to begin with. And what's fascinating here is how that successful Y2K mitigation directly fed into the financial markets.
Oh, right into the dot-com bubble.
Yes! The tech sector had essentially just proven it could save the world from a digital apocalypse. That fueled an incredible, almost hubristic overconfidence. The psychological relief seamlessly translated into a euphoric financial boom.
The numbers are just staggering. In January, the Dow Jones Industrial Average closed at a record 11,722.
And it didn't stop there.
No. In March, the NASDAQ Composite Index hit an all-time high of 5,048, which ended a bull market run that had lasted for over 17 years.
It was the absolute zenith of tech-driven financial optimism, and it was all built on this assumption that internet companies didn't need traditional revenues or even profits to be immensely valuable.
Right, and nothing symbolizes that peak delusion quite like January 10th.
The AOL-Time Warner merger.
America Online, an internet dial-up provider, the people who sent those CDs in the mail purchases, Time Warner, for $162 billion. the largest corporate merger ever.
It's hard to even wrap your head around that number back then.
To put it in perspective for you, it's like imagining a brand new startup using literally nothing but heavily inflated IOUs to buy out a century-old international bank. An internet portal swallowed a physical legacy media empire.
It perfectly encapsulates the illusion of the era. There was this genuine belief that the old rules of economics and physical infrastructure just no longer applied.
Just completely obsolete.
Right. But as we know, those financial markets surrounding the dot-com bubble were just months away from violently bursting when investors finally realized those companies actually needed to, make money.
Right, but I want to make a clear distinction here. Because while the financial bubble was inflating and making all the flashy headlines, the actual technology being launched in the year 2000 was quietly building the exact digital infrastructure you and I rely on every single day.
Oh, absolutely. Let's look at a really pivotal example. May 2nd, 2000. It's often referred to in the sources as Blue Switch Day.
Blue Switch Day.
Yeah. On this day, the U.S. military removed a limiter on the global positioning system GPS, known as selective availability.
Okay, wait, stop right there, because this is wild to me. A lot of people probably don't realize that before 2000, GPS was intentionally terrible for normal people. How did that limiter actually work?
Well, GPS relies on incredibly precise timing signals sent from satellites to your receiver to calculate your exact location. But during the Cold War, the U.S. military intentionally introduced clock errors into the public signal.
So they scrambled it on purpose?
They did. They degraded the accuracy for civilians to prevent adversaries from using American satellites to guide their own weapons systems.
Right, makes sense.
So for the military, GPS was pinpoint accurate, but for a civilian, it might put you somewhere within a few hundred yards.
So it was fine for, like, a cargo ship out in the middle of the ocean,
Yeah.
but completely useless for finding a coffee shop.
Exactly. But by the year 2000, the economic benefits of precise global navigation heavily outweighed the military risks. So at midnight on May 2nd, the U.S. government just stopped scrambling the signal.
Just flip the switch.
Literally. Instantly, civilian GPS accuracy went from the size of a football stadium to the size of a parking space.
Think about what that means for you today. Every time your phone reroutes you around a traffic jam, every rideshare app, modern supply chain logistics, tracking your morning run, all of it was essentially born on May 2nd, 2000. All because the military decided to share the good satellites.
And it wasn't just navigation that was mapped that year. On June 26th, international teams announced the first working draft of the Human Genome Project.
We literally mapped the 3 billion chemical base pairs that make up human DNA. It's incredible.
We mapped the globe and we mapped ourselves. And meanwhile, the consumer hardware we used to interact with this new world was radically shifting.
Like the PlayStation 2.
Yes. Sony released the PS2 in Japan in March. It went on to become the best-selling video game console of all time, largely by putting a DVD player in millions of living rooms.
And then there's the phone everybody remembers.
The Nokia 3310, released in September. It's a crucial piece of tech history because it was so ubiquitous and so durable that it essentially trained an entire generation on how to use mobile technology, text messaging, and portable interfaces.
You could literally drop that phone down a flight of stairs and it would be fine.
Pretty much. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, you see a definitive shift in 2000. Technology moved from localized achievements, like having a PC on your desk, to a borderless global infrastructure.
Yeah.
From the DNA inside our cells to the invisible GPS net wrapping the entire globe.
We even established a permanent foothold off the planet. On Halloween, October 31st, the Soyuz TM-31 launched, carrying Expedition 1 to the International Space Station.
A huge milestone.
And since November 2000, the ISS has been continuously crewed. Every single day since then, human beings have been living in space.
It really paints a picture of this hyper-connected, borderless utopia.
It does.
Right.
But here's where it gets really interesting, and where I have to push back a little on this purely optimistic view. Because that same hyper-connected, borderless infrastructure immediately revealed a terrifying dark side.
The vulnerabilities became very clear very fast.
Exactly. In May of 2000, a computer virus called I Love You originated in the Philippines and paralyzed the globe.
That is a vital point. The I Love You virus demonstrated the extreme fragility of this new infrastructure. It was an email worm.
Yeah.
It arrived in your inbox with the subject line, I love you, and an attachment that looked like a text file, but was actually a malicious script.
And because it exploited basic human psychology, I mean, everyone wants to open a love letter, right?
Of course.
And because our global email networks were suddenly so wildly efficient, it spread to tens of millions of computers in a matter of hours.
It overwrote files. It forwarded itself to everyone in the victim's address book. It caused an estimated $10 billion in damages worldwide.
10 billion.
It was the exact moment humanity realized that a single malicious file created by one person could cause worldwide disruption almost instantly. It was the dark flip side of the borderless utopia.
Which perfectly transitions us into the next major reality check of 2000. Because this newly wired, borderless digital utopia immediately crashed headfirst into the very physical, heavily bordered realities of global politics.
The contrast is really striking.
It really is.
Yeah.
Just as the technological guard was changing, the geopolitical map was undergoing these massive, permanent tectonic shifts.
When you review the historical records, they outline a remarkable concentration of leadership changes among major world powers in this single calendar year.
It reads like a massive game of musical chairs. When the music stopped, an entirely new cast of characters sat down to lead the major world powers. So let's look at this as a high-stakes stress test of how different nations handled power transitions.
Right.
Starting with the United States.
Yeah.
November of 2000 brings the incredibly tight presidential election between George W. Bush and Al Gore.
It famously came down to the state of Florida, where the margin of victory was incredibly slim. We're talking just a few hundred votes out of millions cast.
Yeah, a razor-thin margin.
This led to a controversial, highly scrutinized recount process. You had debates over punch card ballots and hanging chads.
The hanging chads.
Exactly. The institutional friction was immense. Ultimately, the process was halted on December 12th by the United States Supreme Court in the Bush v. Gore decision, which essentially certified George W. Bush as the winner.
Right. And looking at it from the sources, it was a massive stress test of the American electoral system. The system bent under the weight of the recount, but it didn't break. It was resolved by an institutional ruling.
An institutional resolution.
Exactly. And meanwhile, just south of the border in Mexico, you have another massive historic shift in July. Vicente Fox of the PAN Party is elected president.
And to understand the gravity of that, you have to know that the PRI party had held continuous power in Mexico for 71 years.
71 years. Wow.
It was an entrenched political machine. Fox's victory ended decades of single-party rule. And remarkably, it happened through an electoral ballot shift rather than an armed revolution.
So another institutional resolution. But when we look across the globe, not every transition had those institutional shock absorbers.
No, they certainly didn't.
In Russia, Vladimir Putin is elected president in March of 2000, beginning his long grip on Russian politics. And then over in Yugoslavia, the transition is much more volatile.
In October, Yugoslav President Slobodan Milosevic resigns. But this didn't happen via a quiet court ruling or a standard election.
Right.
It followed mass demonstrations. Hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets in Belgrade, protesting a disputed election. The stress of the transition spilled directly into the streets.
And we see that friction escalate into outright tragedy in the Middle East. In July, U.S. President Bill Clinton hosts Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak and Palestinian Authority Chairman Yasser Arafat at the Camp David Summit.
They were attempting to negotiate a final status settlement to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, dealing with deeply complex historical issues like borders and the status of Jerusalem.
Very heavy, deeply entrenched issues.
Yes, and the summit ended without an agreement. The tension from that diplomatic failure was palpable.
And then it boils over.
It does. Shortly after, in September, Israeli opposition leader Ariel Sharon visits the Temple Mount, which is a site deeply sacred and highly contested by both sides. This visit sparks widespread civilian uprisings that become known as the Second Intifada.
So what does this all mean when we look at the year 2000 as a whole? We have the Supreme Court deciding a U.S. election, Mexico peacefully ending a 70-year political dynasty, massive street protests toppling a leader in Belgrade, and diplomatic gridlock sparking tragic violence in the Middle East.
This raises an important question for anyone studying history. How do different systems handle the stress of power transitions? Because as technology was actively trying to erase borders and connect humanity globally, political realities remain deeply, sometimes violently, entrenched in local physical systems.
It's like two different worlds operating at the same time.
Exactly. The way society absorbs the stress of transitioning power really defines its trajectory for decades.
And that tension between our advanced, borderless systems and harsh physical reality brings us perfectly to the final major theme running through 2000.
The sheer unpredictability of the physical world.
Right. because despite human attempts to neatly control the world, whether through drafting the human genome or heavily structuring political institutions, 2000 was a year where the physical world asserted its absolute chaotic unpredictability.
Through both natural forces and catastrophic human error, the list of disasters from this year is deeply sobering.
It really is.
In July, an Air France Concorde crashed just after takeoff from Paris, killing all 109 people aboard and 4 on the ground.
And the Concorde was the absolute pinnacle of luxury supersonic aviation.
Yeah.
And the failure was devastatingly simple, right?
Yes. It wasn't a complex software glitch. The plane ran over a piece of metal debris left on the runway by another aircraft.
Just a piece of scrap metal.
It blew a tire, which ruptured a fuel tank, sparking a fire. It is a brutal reminder of mechanical fragility.
And then in August, we see military might succumb to that same fragility. During massive Russian naval exercises, the nuclear submarine Kursk sank in the Barents Sea following a torpedo explosion in its hull. All 118 crew members were lost. And in November, 155 skiers and snowboarders died in a horrific funicular fire in an alpine tunnel in Kaprun, Austria.
We also see massive environmental disasters overwhelming human infrastructure. In October, a coal slurry impoundment broke in Martin County, Kentucky.
Oh, this one is awful.
Over 250 million gallons of toxic coal sludge burst through an underground mine shaft and flooded surrounding waterways. It is widely considered a greater environmental disaster than the Exxon Valdez oil spill, practically suffocating the local ecosystem.
I really want you to sit with that contradiction for a second. In the exact same year that humanity successfully drafted the microscopic code of our own DNA.
And continuously populated a space station.
Yes. We were completely powerless against a random piece of metal on a runway or a massive wave of toxic mud. We had the illusion of ultimate control, balanced by absolute vulnerability. And then, just to make it weirder, history throws in these bizarre oddities, things that prove reality is always stranger than fiction.
The historical records highlight some truly unusual events in 2000. For instance, in January, a bizarre social panic erupted in Soria, Spain.
Oh, the falling ice. This is so strange.
Yes. Large chunks of ice were reported to have simply fallen from a clear sky. The media dubbed them aerolites, and it unleashed a multitude of similar reports and panic all over Spain for months.
People were terrified to go outside.
Scientists debated whether it was atmospheric anomalies or waste from airplanes, but it completely captured the public's imagination.
And then you have the Pyrenean ibex. This is a tragedy wrapped in peak irony.
It really is.
On January 6th, the very last naturally conceived Pyrenean ibex, which is this majestic wild goat native to the mountains of Spain and France, was found dead.
Yeah.
Now, did it die of a complex genetic disease? A predator? No. It was completely taken out by a falling tree.
It's the ultimate random act of nature ending an entire species.
Unbelievable.
And perhaps the most absurd human oddity occurred in October when Pakistani authorities found an apparent mummy in the Belovistan province. It was claimed to be an ancient Persian princess.
An ancient Persian princess mummy. And this sparks an immediate, highly serious international custody battle. The government of Iran, the government of Pakistan, and even the Taliban in Afghanistan all lay claim to this priceless ancient artifact.
Only for researchers to analyze it several months later and announce that the mummy was, in fact, a modern-day forgery.
You're kidding.
Nope. Someone had taken a modern corpse and artificially mummified it to sell on the black market.
It is so wildly contradictory. We are navigating with newly unlocked military GPS satellites, trading billions of dollars in .com stocks, yet international governments are literally fighting over a fake mummy, while the last majestic ibex gets crushed by a random piece of timber.
It is a humbling synthesis. It shows us that no matter how advanced our operating systems become, no matter how seamlessly our digital networks connect us, we remain biological creatures living on a very physical, very volatile planet.
Yeah, that's a great point.
We're still completely at the mercy of sudden mechanical failures, environmental forces, and the sheer unfiltered randomness of the natural world.
Which brings us back to where we started. When you look at all of this together, the year 2000 was far more than just a calendar change or a Y2K panic.
It wasn't just a party.
No, it was the incubator for the modern era. It was a year of billion-dollar media mergers that predicted the internet's dominance before the bubble burst. It was the birth of civilian GPS, the mapping of the human genome, and the realization of our digital vulnerability through global viruses.
A lot of firsts.
A year of geopolitical earthquakes, institutional tests, electoral shifts, and tragic violence that set the stage for the 21st century. all balanced by deeply humbling reminders of our lack of ultimate control.
And as we close this deep dive, there is one final detail from the year 2000 I want to leave you with. Amidst all that chaos, all the technological rushing and political shifting, on January 1st, 2000, a musical composition called Long Player began playing.
Oh, this is a beautiful concept.
It is a piece of music designed to play continuously, without ever repeating, for exactly 1,000 years.
Yep.
It is a project built on the ultimate long-term perspective. As you reflect on the dot-com crashes, the space station launches, the changing of world leaders, and the sudden accidents that all occurred in just this one single year, imagine what the world will actually look like when that song finally comes to an end in the year 3000.
You know, usually when we talk about time, there's this expectation of precision, like a digital clock ticking over from 1999 to 2000. Clean. Binary. But then you step into the actual history of a year like 2000, and suddenly that clean clock is broken.
It's a lot messier.
We're looking at a landscape that is messy, filled with false endings and hidden beginnings. The calendar flipped, but the transition is still playing out today. Keep digging, keep questioning, and we will see you on the next deep dive.